God, it keeps going. We both have the sense that the theme for this should be very Muppet-like. I don't know. I get that vibe for sure.
Yeah, no, I think it was middle of last week, realized that I might be working with the person who can actually make our theme song.
Oh, no way.
I've been so back in like early March or early April when I like went out and was like, hey, does anybody need an Adrianne voice? And I got a couple projects my way. Yeah. I've been mixing this album of this woman who had me sing harmony on a thing, just one song at a time. And her brain works as such that she has a horn section in her head at all times. And I was like, it just occurred to me, I don't know, 4 days ago, I was like, wait a second. We could totally, I bet she could do some sort of like 50s, 60s television show theme. Like there was a kids show, You Can't Do That on Television back in the 80s that has a similar vibe.
Yeah, I think so.
Of our doot, 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 and then other shit happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, do you want me to reach out to her, see if she's got...
Yes, totally.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
See, sometimes it's the little things like that make a project real for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like not essential, but man, yeah, that would be cool. And then piece by piece, you build a thing out of all the different ideas.
Absolutely. Well, and I just, just make sure that both of us watched a lot of the older shows prior to because I've watched a lot of TV. I've gotten more than the 10,000 hours in that area.
Yeah. World-class expert. That's the term that you're looking for.
Expert television watcher. Absolutely.
Yeah. Above 10,000 hours. That's the term.
Mastery.
World-class expert. Yeah.
Television mastery, which was hilarious because a friend brought me some stuff from the grocery store. Because these are the days where people are like, I'm at the grocery store and you're not. Can I get you anything? And you just drop it on your porch. She was telling me she watched the movie The Old Guard, which I watched and we talked about maybe a couple months ago. And she thought it was awful. She's like, the dialogue's really bad. And I was like, Charlie's people get shot and they kick each other's asses and... Yeah, it's an action movie. It's an action movie. And I was just
there was dialogue?
I was trying to figure out. Yeah. She's like, literally somewhere in the movie, one of the characters says, you remember the one time I killed the guy who killed me? And she's like, watch it back. It happens. And I was like, I believe you. But here's the thing. It's an action movie. So people who enjoy action movies, like, the scripts being good is this new invention of from Marvel hiring like real writers to do action movies. That's fucking weird, and it's great.
If you're a real action fan, you should know how to enjoy an action movie with a shit script. Because if you've only watched action movies with good scripts,
and I was
you're missing out.
I care about you. I care about your ability to enjoy the things that you're watching. So as an expert on watching things, and not only just watching things, but the lighting in some of the worst movies ever made and still getting grand amounts of enjoyment, I think that you should model my strategies for that. And I can totally teach you how to never have an awful movie experience again. And it's like, one of the ways that I do it is that I drop in at the top of, if it's an action movie, I just drop in at the top, and I was like, I'm going to start in the flow of 8-year-old Adrianne. And then if it meets some expectations and also impresses 12-year-old Adrianne, it can still be a great experience. Like, but like if you get to like, Ragnarok, Thor Ragnarok, and it's like, holy fuck, 40 whatever Adrianne is like, yeah, this is the best. Like, but you just start little. And it's like, oh, bang, bang, yes. fart jokes, punching, all of that. It's good.
Pacific Rim was a movie like that for me. Like, I really needed to go back to 10-year-old Nicholas to get into that one. But when I did, it was great. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and sometimes I forget to do the thing. And I'm like, fuck it. Like, little me would think this was sweet because look, explosions! Yeah. Not that I wasn't sophisticated in my tastes at 8. It's just not useful to spend time, in a state of non-enjoyment.
Well, there is another way to enjoy bad movies, which is a kind of masochistic strategy that I know you're familiar with, which is when you aim for bad, like you're going for something that, and then the enjoyment is how much it doesn't match up with your expectations of what a movie should be, and the cringe element of it, the how did this get made element of it, which is another way to enjoy a movie. Like, you don't have to go into the story. You can also separate from it and still be in enjoyment.
Totally. You'd be like, oh, this is someone's cousin. Yeah. And of someone important. And this is just every Thanksgiving they've been talking about this movie.
Yeah. I'm watching a person have a midlife crisis right now. This movie is this person's midlife crisis. Yeah.
That's fun. Oh, hey, guess who we are?
Oh, right. Can I guess?
Oh, yes. Okay.
We are the Enlightened Couch Potato Show. And what do we do here, Adrianne?
Well, we help people to, oh my gosh, there's that sentence. We help people to learn how to TV deeply. Oh. Which also can potentially mean that we help people learn how to watch movies and television for maximum psychological.
So close. You're so close. You're like 3 words away.
And spiritual development.
Good. Yes. I give it a 8.9. You'll get to the 10. It's not. It's very little to go. It's perfect.
Yeah. Should that have been a die if it was a splat?
Right. But no. It was okay. It was okay. It's just a little bit of tweaking.
Oh man, consonants and such. I just get so sleepy in the middle
of sentences.
Sometimes.
They're so long sometimes. I'm just tired.
Yes, all the words have so many syllables. So I'm Adrianne Gunn.
And I'm Nicholas Rave.
Yeah, we're 2 personal development junkies and somewhat experts. We are always in levels of mastery of utilizing tools to help people change their lives. And also we're experts at watching a fuck ton of television and movies.
We became aware a few years ago that we shared a strategy that we kind of, I don't know if we both thought that it was a unique thing to us, that when we watch movies and TV, we try to make it into a transformational experience. And there's a lot of different tips and tricks that we've figured out over the years on how to do this. For me, I like to weave in a bunch of hypnosis stuff and Joseph Campbell stuff about the hero's journey and archetypes. And Adrianne has her favorite methods.
Yeah, my methods are I'd like to be somehow different or better in some way. Drop in and then find myself sobbing or notice the shiver feeling or whatever, and just sort of expand into Einstein time and sensations in my body and go oh, something's happening. I don't know what yet, but next week it'll be different.
Yeah. Boy, we sound crazy.
Isn't that neat? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so comfortable here in Crazy Town.
I've been working on a slogan. There are 2 kinds of people, and we're not one of them.
Yeah. Good one. Okay. What have you been watching, Adrianne?
Yeah, so I am wearing my From the Ashes We Will Rise, the 100 shirt today. Oh. I actually matched the shirt with the subject.
Nice.
Finally went back to watch the final 2 seasons of the 100.
Okay, catch me up again, because I honestly don't remember what this show is.
So the 100, the concept of the 100 on one level is, it is after nuclear fallout and those who could escaped to space stations. And so there's about 9 or 13 space stations that form together to share resources in what they called the Ark. And the idea was they were supposed to survive
this one. Keep going, though.
For 100 years. They're supposed to have resources enough for 100 years and then go back to the Earth, because that was about what they calculated it would take for the Earth to heal after all of these nuclear weapons. But at 60-something years or so, they're running out of resources. So they send 100 of their juvenile delinquents back to the Earth to find out if it's inhabitable. And when they get to the ground, they find out that they're not the only ones who are there. That is the start of the premise. I'm sure that they found a shorter way to say that. In the Netflix description.
That set it up quite nicely.
So one of the things that makes this a really powerful and interesting show to watch is we strip humans down to survival mode. And there's a collision here of technology and just surviving in the elements of and zero technology. There's a collision of guiding philosophies of different people. There's the collision of everybody seems to make completely different decisions when they're in surviving mode. And I know that the idea that there are no villains is still kind of a newish idea in the progression of filmmaking and television. We're getting more of this anti-hero or more well-rounded storytelling around villainy, and this idea of good versus evil is just being stretched open and grayed out.
We're getting more nuance.
Yeah. Well, this show in particular was one of the first, and so this, they have 7 seasons, so 7-ish years ago when I started watching it, the thing that was spectacular to me was that they were able to give us a very clear story of the idea that everyone is doing the very best they can with the circumstances and resources that they have. And this is one of our presuppositions and ideas around NLP that we're around. Everyone really is doing the best with the information that they have, with the resources that they have, and who they are, right? This show was the first thing I had ever seen that really clearly motivates every single character's extreme choices. So I think that that's valuable because it helps us to extrapolate this creative project helps us to completely understand tribalism, the role of religion, the role of spirituality, the role of technology, the role of all of these influences on humans trying to survive in circumstances. And if you make it so extreme that it's just about survival, we can kind of understand why even just doing normal life in non-extreme circumstances can be challenging. And they really take that to some philosophies of faith, philosophies of, AI shows up in the show.
Ooh.
The themes of vengeance and revenge and justice and truth and what is the right thing to do, and can humans transcend tribalism, and can they transcend is love of another person, is that a selfish thing, or should it be love of all? The ideas of these, we know it as sort of the values hierarchy of the group think versus individual achievements. All of these themes are on the line in the show. And now that I've seen, I actually might need to watch the ending again, because the perspective there at the end is very interesting. I didn't leave feeling resolved about our ability to, here's the deal. If you narrow down society to just about 400-ish people.
Yeah.
And they all have completely vastly different faiths, and they all have weapons and the ability to it can get hard to just govern a small group of people.
Yeah.
And that's a bit insane to just wrap my brain around that we've been humaning for a really long time, and that we have this amount of peace is pretty fantastic, but it's
oh yeah,
it's really fragile too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that show just... The good news also is that the characters are pretty compelling.
Well, I think, stories where they put you in those where they put their characters in the extremes of human experience we've talked about this before, another value of that is just living through it and being like, what would I do in that situation? Trying it on, I think in your imagination, you lose a little bit of fear of it, which is why I think, stories sort of necessitate drama and danger and stuff. But it sounds like that when you were describing it, the term morality play came to mind.
A little bit.
You were talking, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. I mean like a good tale about making the right choice in a difficult situation. That's a morality play. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and whether there is a right choice.
Yeah.
Living with the results, how forgiveness works. Is it necessary?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? There are just the impossible choices. What's really great and also hard about this particular show is almost all the time there's a plan, and then things go awry or people make new decisions and you sort of adjust. So what you think's about to happen always gets sort of turned around in ridiculous and crazy ways, which sometimes makes it a hard show to watch because everything's always sort of fucked up. If you like rooting for any particular path, maybe I haven't watched Game of Thrones. Maybe that's a Game of Thrones thing too. Like,
a bit.
Yeah. That twist and turn, and every 5 minutes from now, it's going to be very different. And we don't even know. And that's a little stressful to watch.
Yeah.
Even if you're expecting it. We don't know. Now someone new is dead or something weird happened or, oh my God, time. So I took a break from it because I was just the no breath between the chaos was, at whatever point I was watching it last time, it's just like, I just need a little more calm. I don't want to be in resonance with chaos every 20 minutes.
Well, I think we go through phases. I mean, and I think there's also some of these things are an acquired taste. Like, did you always enjoy stories like that at all? Or have there been times in your life when you were not in a place where you wanted to watch things like that?
I think there was a gap of maybe 10 years between, hey, I like action stuff and I like, so what I enjoyed watching in my early 20s, well, through all my 20s, that decade, I just really liked indie flicks and ensemble movies. Like, for instance, I'm about to watch a movie with Susan Sarandon. I don't remember the title, but the premise is she's gonna die, and I think she's gathering her family to ask them to kill her because she's got some sort of terminal thing, and she just wants to go on her own terms. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. So most of my 20s, I would watch ensemble movies of they return home after a drug addiction, blah blah blah, and stuff happens or they've been gone.
Well, that's just a different kind of no breath, uncomfortable experience,
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing is or a movie where they're two people sit in a cafe and talk to each other. Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I would watch that movie several different times over. So that was what I was into in my 20s. And then somewhere early 30s, I was like, I seem to have an easier time doing life after I watched an action movie. And so I got into that. So those are my phases. Although I think the other thing happening for me in COVID world is I seem to be watching or pulled towards watching romantic movies and things. Because in some ways I can satisfy that tingly sensation of longing and love existing. Yeah. Yay, without for me, it doesn't necessarily exacerbate my people have germs and issues. And I don't think I want any of that right now.
Yeah, just a little bit of a trickle of human connection and intimacy.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. What are you watching?
Well, my movie was a blast from my past.
And it wasn't a blast
childhood movie. No, it was not. That also was a blast from the past. But so this goes on a little bit of a journey because it's going to go from that one to talking about a couple of other experiences that I've had that I felt were related. So the movie is a so shitty Disney movie called Mr. Boogedy. And it looks like a community theater VHS production. It's there's a couple of actors in it you might recognize from something. I can't remember what else the dad was in. I've seen him in something. But oh my God, it is like my sister said she saw that it was on Disney Plus and tried to watch it and she couldn't get through it. And I sat there and I watched the whole thing. Yeah, it's just aggressively annoying in a lot of ways.
Sounds amazing.
But it's I don't know, it's sincere in a few parts. But the real point was that movie scared the ever-loving crap out of me when I was a little kid. And that's what I found profound, was sitting there and watching it and being like, okay, what must I have been like? What must the world have been like? What must my brain have been like at that time to get scared by this? Like, go watch it if you want a good laugh about me and what scared me as a kid. But I remember very specific moments. I remember green footprints on the wall, and I remember the dad getting possessed, which was a very scary concept to me. So I watched my 2-year-old discover his shadow the other night. We went for a walk. And he loves going outside. Like, every time he can get to go on a walk, we can. And so it was after dinner and it was dark. And he's like beating on the door and he goes outside and he's running and he looks down and he saw the shadow of a palm leaf. And it looks a little spidery. And he looked at it and went, and turned around and ran back over to me. And I don't see this kid scared very often. Like, he's, got a pretty chill life and he's happy most of the time. And he's not super timid about stuff. But you could see like real fear. Like, he was like, what is that? Because in his mind, he's like, that's a creature and it's about as big as me and it's black and it's really close to the ground and it looks like it has a lot of legs. And so we go over and we're like, oh, buddy, it's okay. And I pick him up and we like show him the leaf and show him the shadow and he's still a little bit like this. And then I set him down and he turns and he sees his own head. And he's looking at the ground. And then I moved my hand up. And he looks over at my hand and looks at the shadow. And then he puts his hand up. And then he's looking back at the leaf. And like, you're watching like new neural connections being made at 1 billion a second. And he's like putting all this together. It made me think about how stories impact us differently when we're kids and how stories impact you differently at different stages in your life. So just today, I had an amazing experience with my older boy, Pierce. He's 11 years old now. And I asked him if I could talk about this. We were watching, he forgot his science textbook at his mom's. So I was like, well, you're going to have to do science anyway. So how about I get to pick what you're going to do? And I think he was expecting this to be a punishment. So I brought him down and we put on this YouTube video that I found. It's called Life Beyond. Go look it up. The second episode, I haven't watched the first one yet. The second episode is all about the possibilities of different alien life in the universe. And they like do this metaphor of like, imagine a museum with all of the life forms in the whole universe. And then they like break it down, and the visuals and the music, it is stunning. I told him, I was like, man, imagine if school was like this. Imagine if all your science classes were taught to you this well and this engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I know.
Except that could be our future.
That's my point. It's like you watch this and you're like, how can you not be fascinated by science? The last moment of this whole video, I won't give it away, but the sense of curiosity and awe that it inspires literally brought me to tears at the end of the video. At some point in the middle of the video, Pierce raised his hand and I paused it. And I don't remember exactly how this came up, but he basically said, I think there has to be reincarnation. I was like, okay, why? And he said, well, because it just can't be blackness at the end of it. And I said, well, and I could tell that he was like pretty serious about this. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I mean, I guess that's the thing is, I know a lot of people want to believe that. A lot of people want to believe that it's not over and it's not just nothing. And he came back and started talking about his own fear of mortality. And we got into this movie about alien life, opened up this door about him being like, I don't want it to end. I don't want to die. And I told him about a book that I've been reading called The Worm at the Core. Mm-hmm. Did we talk about this?
I don't think so.
So there's a quote. Did I close the window? Give me 1 second because I actually really want to get this and it won't take me long. So the quote is, American philosopher and arguably the first psychologist ever, William James, wrote that the knowledge that we must die is the worm at the core of the human condition, a universally shared fear that informs all our thoughts and actions, from the great art we create to the devastating wars we wage. And he makes a case that we basically built civilization to shelter us from the knowledge that one day you have to die. Mm-hmm. And in Buddhism, one of the core tenets is, I know that I will die and I cannot know when I will die. Therefore, how should I live? Which is like the most basic question, but it's so profound when you really start to think about it. And I shared all this with my 11-year-old. And I was talking to him about this, and I was saying, like, to me, I think the key is this is for me what has worked. And I shared this with him was agnosticism. Agnosticism is a word that means I don't know. Mm-hmm. It means it's possible, but it's also possible that it's not possible. And agnosticism is learning how to be okay in the I don't know space without getting too attached to either one of them, because you really don't know. And anybody who claims to know is lying or misled in some way. And I think it helped. He seemed to feel like it was helpful.
Yeah.
And then I said, I don't think most kids your age are like really thinking about a lot of this stuff. And I think that it's probably true after I said that, that I think a lot of kids don't think about this kind of thing. But I think it's probably more than you think.
Oh, yeah. No, I recall having reincarnation conversations as a tiny young person.
And like existential crises of an 11-year-old.
Does Jesus make sense? And all these other things that exist. Well, here's what's interesting. I think so. The different amounts of human stories about what's possible and what people experience here, it seems as though reincarnation makes sense and is likely in not the way we think about it.
Right,
So
right.
if we're thinking of like, there's you live a life and then you die and then what happens after,
right,
as a trajectory, I think we're proving that we, as like no energy is like destroyed, that concept. We're learning that we have knowledge stored from people who came from before us. So maybe that's told in stories of like, I remember this past life. And I was like, well, I am made up of the genetic code and information of everything that's been before me. I'm also made up of the information from all the food that I'm eating. And I'm made up of senses, and I can pick up on like there's ways that humans can begin to tell a story, and they might frame it like I'm remembering a past life, and you might be hearing the story that's stored in your knee of, you know, a couple thousand years ago in your lineage. That I think we're proving that that's a thing. The other thing that on the other side of a death is that are a lot of experiences people are having with the continuation of a human's, like a person's story, or they're showing up. So there are people who are channeling the energy of, so there's a lot of humans who are having the experience of people aren't gone when they're gone. They're still here in some way. And they are, I don't know what to do with the mediums and that sort of phenomenon of, hey, that person's still here and this is how they show up. Their energy is still doing
I like Coco.
stuff.
Speaking of Enlightened Couch Potato, there's 3 deaths, right? There's when you die physically, and then I can't remember the other one, but then the other one is when the last person who knows your name dies. And that, to me, where does immortality exist? They call him the immortal bard. Why? Because fucking Shakespeare will never die. As long as humanity exists, Shakespeare will exist. So that's where you live in the immortal sense. So I think of it as like, you know, that science fiction concept of if you had a teleporter that could teleport you from Earth to Mars instantaneously. You like close your eyes on Earth and you open your eyes and you're on Mars. But then it turns out that it's actually not teleporting you. It's just making a copy of you and then disintegrating you on Earth. So from a consciousness perspective, you wake up on Mars, but that's a problem for most people, because if that machine ever broke and for like 10 minutes there were 2 of you, like we got issues philosophically at that point. Yeah. But what if that's what it's like to die? That like you do die, but then another version of you wakes up in the imaginary dimension, the dimension of memes, the dimension of memories, the dimension of the collective unconscious. And it's not a physical place, but it is a real place. And, you know, Michael Jackson, Elvis, Jesus, even Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda and the Buddha and all of these people exist. Even Zeus and Ra. Those characters still exist. You're a character in that world in some people's minds. Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the 100 is in that realm too.
Yeah.
Lot more shows that I'm watching lately are, you know, what is it? Altered Carbon, talking about these people who have figured out how to like store consciousness somewhere and put it in new bodies, and what the heck that means. And
that worm at the core thing has really been hitting me, because for like a while, I don't remember if I shared this with you, but for a while I was really obsessed with Freud's concept of a death drive. Have you ever heard of that? That he like identified this idea that human beings may have a drive, like deeper than instincts or drives, and the drive, they may have a drive for destruction and death and suffering. And I think I pretty vehemently disagree. But I think that understanding it became an obsession for a while. But I think that what I was actually circling around, I think they are actually talking about in The Worm at the Core, because there's something that is evoked through art, like I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me is one of my favorite artists, H.R. Giger, Do you know who that is?
No.
He did the design for the Alien in the Alien movie,
Okay.
and his art is very death and birth and very dark and alien and scary, but it's evocative of these, for me, deep places in the collective unconscious.
Right.
And there's a book that was written by a guy named Stanislav Grof, who is considered like the godfather of transpersonal psychology, who basically writes that Giger's art is connected to birth trauma, basically, that it's all about the fear of death, and this and that's what it's meant to evoke inside of us. And we find it repelling for a lot of people, that they don't like it because it brings this thing up to the surface that we're all trying to forget about. And The Worm at the Core speaks to how important it is to realize how important this is to you. Because most people are like, I don't sit around afraid to die all the time. What are you talking about? But it's there under the surface.
I've been thinking a lot lately, and the second show that I started watching was The Last Kingdom. It's about a person who was both Dane and trying to remember the name of the Saxon, both Dane and Saxon. Okay. And he ends up being a warrior who fights for King Edward at this point in the story, but his father before. Anyway, so it's got the whole, like, the Danes and the Saxons and everybody fighting, and the Welsh, who apparently in their model of the world are apparently large, really unattractive redheads. I don't know why. I just noticed. It might be racism. Like, specifically, the Welsh are hands down interestingly depicted in this show, The Last Kingdom. You can check it out. I'm not making this up. But
like, it looks intentional.
It must be, because it's pretty clear perspective happening in the show of who the Welsh are. Anyway, so having watched the 100 and then now watching The Last Kingdom, of these, and also in this time, I keep thinking about, is it something about death? Is it something about survival? We have millennia and more of a kind of tribalism, a kind of frontierism, a kind of colonialism, this conquering, very masculine conquering thing. There are communities of humans who had existed with the earth and with resources, and they replenished, and they had a different relationship with humanity and with where they lived. And because of the relationship that they had and their abundance of resources, being near enough to people who had fewer resources and a completely different personality and priorities, they were slaughtered. So cool. We do not have, I'm not living in a country that came from humans. They did. We slaughtered them. So there's all of this, like, oh, here's land. Let's go into the land. Let's slaughter. There's this, like, is that born of, like, something about death and mortality, or is that, like, lizard survival shit that keeps, like, I just need to keep making cells, fuck things, eat all the stuff. Like, there's this voracious appetite of conquering that seems to keep going. And I think that we've expanded to most of the places that we can expand to. And there are still humans who are like, awesome, let's go to Mars, let's go to the moon, because they just have to keep eating the next fucking thing and conquering the next fucking thing. And I'm like, maybe there's another. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know whether it's specifically, maybe there's a human parasite that exists in how we, I don't know. I don't know if it's inherent. I know that it's part of the path we've been on for a while. I know that also the religions who were most willing to kill other people are the ones that are still around right now. So that's a thing. Yeah. So, it's just, we don't have a lot of written documents from before then, because writing is part of the story. I think we might be on the precipice of some new ways of existing as humans. And I think having sort of run out of resources, part of helping that. And it's like, oh, wait, we're kind of out of space. are we so different than everybody else? Maybe not. Like, I don't know what's happening, but there seems to be this really voracious, like, we're the virus thing going on.
Yeah, I have had enough experiences in my personal life and with the clients that I work with where I see things go to chaos before they get better. And that is part of bringing the trauma up to the surface. And that when it happens, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like progress. It doesn't feel like I should surrender to this and trust that this is actually a good sign. And of course, the turkey feels every day of the year leading up to Thanksgiving that humans really love it. Right? They think, we have 364 days worth of evidence that human beings apparently worship turkeys as gods. They take care of us all the time. And that evidence leads right up until the very end. But my feeling is that I'm generally more optimistic. I think that I don't see how you can look at what's going on in the world right now and not see it as birth pains.
Yeah.
Something is being born, or at least like adolescent growing pains. That it's like, I don't want to grow up and be mature. And
yelling and screaming and slamming doors and kicking stuff.
Yeah.
And then coming in and being hyper goofy and Yeah. I don't know. It's just these like two shows of all of these warring tribes is where my brain has been in the last couple of weeks. And and also, I watched this amazing interview between Kyle Cease and Louis C. Howes. School of Greatness is Lewis's podcast. I think I watched it on YouTube. It's maybe a year old within this. It's before COVID. And the two of them are talking about wealth and business, and Kyle Cease is very dropped in. I think he's trained in like Hakomi. He's trained in a philosophy of what emotions are actually for. Phenomenal episode. One of the most clearly articulated explanations for why we have emotions and what's happening when we're crying, how change works, that sort of thing. It's awesome.
Cool.
And what's really fascinating to me in
Kyle
this
seems
episode,
like he's evolved then since when I last checked him out.
Yeah. He's pretty groovy.
That's awesome.
And Louis also more recently wrote The Masks of Masculinity. And in the last 6-ish years, he's been doing a process of understanding and healing this toxic masculine story and where it lives in his body. And what's really fascinating is as Kyle is talking about emotions and their value, Louis still has the language of a colonizer. He's like, how do you conquer fear? And how do you like he's still like, and it makes sense. This is a gentleman who was beat up and traumatized when he was little for not being a strong enough kid, who became a professional fucking football player. And then he became a fucking multimillionaire entrepreneur and got all the cars and the hot chicks and the whatever. And then somehow 6-ish years ago, he's like, why does my life still feel awful and suck? So he's like on the journey. It's really fascinating to watch the two of them have this conversation about emotions and the depth of that, and still hear the ring out of this is still a frontier conqueror philosophy and language you're still using. And I was like, I don't know, it's super fascinating to me. Yeah. I think you'll dig it. I think you'll dig the episode.
I like it. I mean, my view of that dichotomy is what we're wrestling with is yin and yang, and you need both. That conquering thing has its downsides that we are quite well aware of in the world that we live in right now, because the world that we live in right now is hyper yang. And the yin side also has its dark side, and that is happening right now too. And that's why a lot of the people who are more on that yang side are going, well, I'm not going all the way over there. Well, it's like there's the individual and the collective. orientation in your mind, and they both exist, and that real growth is learning how to work with both of them and learning how to like resolve that paradox. Yeah. And it sounds like that they were doing that a little bit in what they were talking about.
I know that Kyle, he doesn't explicitly say anything about the language that Lewis, I mean, like, he clearly articulates his point, and then Lewis still speaks and uses language. It's something I'm noticing. It's a really funny thing. He talks about, like, he does talk about, like you don't need to conquer fear. There's a different thing you do with your emotions. And I don't think he uses the word embrace. Like, it's better for him to describe, like we can put a link
I'm going to check it out. I'm very excited. That sounds great.
Yeah. He's like, you make space for it. You create a space for your feelings to be. And then you create space for that smaller you that's having the feeling and telling you the thing. You like say yes to it. You notice it. You give it time. But you are the space, and you are the bigger person, and you are now an adult. And you let it do the thing. And you notice all of those happening all at once, and I'm just like, yeah. And I'm like, Lewis can still write his like conquer fear, conquer self-doubt book, and it's so cute how that's not the point of the episode. And by the way, he's been in the whole hour.
If you're listening to what Adrianne was just describing, that process of making space for it, and that is the work. When people talk about doing the work, that's the work right there. That's the place where the real healing and transformation comes. And for most people, you need someone else to guide you through that. Need might be the wrong word, but boy, is it easier to have somebody there to make it safe to do it, to tell you to do it. It's like having a personal trainer for your emotions. Like when you have a personal trainer for exercises, you're outsourcing your willpower. They can be like, okay, give me one more. And you could be like, but I'm going to do it anyway. And like, that's what a coach or a therapist is supposed to help you do, is like, do the stuff you know that if you did it, it would help you, but you're not going to do it unless somebody's there making sure you do it.
Yeah. Well, and here's the even bigger thing in our point of our entire show is that in the same way that Kyle Cease in this episode gives Lewis an experience with his emotions and he's guided through it, you can sit down and watch someone in a television show go through an emotional experience, and when you choose to say yes and drop in fully, you get to allow your receptive mirror neurons and your empathy and all of that to have that same, if you have the space to hold someone else's story for an hour or so and have their emotional experience be part of your own emotional journey, you get to also have the healing that they have, as well as other things your unconscious mind wants you to know from saying yes to the television show and their experience inside.
It's like ringing a tuning fork and then holding another tuning fork right next to it, and the second one will start vibrating at the same frequency as the first one. And when you can do that with movies and TV, you can do it with music too, you can do it with a book, but movies and TV are just really easy to do. You can tap into that space where it resonates with you, and some emotional experiences that the character is having or that the script is trying to make you have are going to be more or less profound. But then there's some where it'll hit you, and for whatever reason, let it. Like for me, Moana is like one of the perfect examples of that. I can't watch 5 fucking minutes into that movie before I start crying.
I think I'm in earlier. That starts.
Yeah. There are parts of that movie that are the most predictable way to bring up a very particular and beautiful feeling in me. The end when she's singing to Tafiti and she comes over and they touch foreheads, and oh my God.
Can't even listen to you talk about
it. I know. That movie is perfect.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So let's call it a show. Like we went on quite a journey there, and I really enjoyed that. So thanks everybody for watching, and join us next week. Same bad time, same bad channel, same bad shit, crazy. And And yeah, I look forward to talking even more with you about stuff we're watching.
This is my bad.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye, friends.
See ya.